Welcome to the Chemo Café, episode 2, part 2 of Living with the Big Purple Sea. In part 1, I talked about the first few days following my formal diagnosis, meeting my oncologist and dealing with chemo for the very first time. In part 2, I talk about my experience more generally with the 12 rounds of chemo administered by IV across the 6-month period, the focus being on the key lessons I learned along the way. I also talk about my ongoing test results and what's happening today. As mentioned previously, this is my own personal journey. I'm sharing in the hope that it will help others going through pancreatic cancer or caring for someone with cancer, any cancer. It is my greatest wish that it helps those individuals build much needed strength and resilience to tackle the road ahead. Even if you don't have chronic disease, at the very least, it may make you stop and think about your own health and actions you can take to care for your mind, body, and spirit. Nothing in this episode should be taken as medical advice, and always consult your doctor or medical professional to get advice relevant to your own circumstances. In part 1, I talked about my experience with round 1 of chemo, which was a wake-up call to action. It was a very loud message to stop trying to control the uncontrollable. No amount of confidence and self-belief was going to resolve a blood clot and a low blood count. So lesson 2 in part 1 was imperative to my experience going forward. However, I will caveat that with lesson 1, making sure you are aware of what you can control by asking the questions important to you at the outset and doing your own research on your particular condition, as not all pancreatic cancers or any cancers are created equal. So let's dive in to the other lessons I've learned along the way. And if you have any tips or tricks of your own, I'd really love to hear them. Lesson 3, nausea and the other end. Sickness and diarrhea go hand in hand on this journey. And I can say with confidence, it forms part of the chemo experience for most of us going through it. They are like the Penguin and Riddler of Batman. The villains of the piece sneaking up on you at first very subtly, then they just muscle in and cause havoc. Hence, taking the anti-nausea medication prescribed is crucial, and Imodium will almost certainly be part of your superhero squad. My nausea and my bowel problems were not entirely unexpected. The strength of my chemo had a lot to do with it, and I had been warned about it right from the very beginning. So I was somewhat prepared, but for me at times it was quite severe. The nausea and diarrhea would hit without warning, and it came in waves, but these were tsunami-level waves. As I mentioned before, it did finally settle after I got with the program and started consistently taking the meds I was prescribed. But it was a steep learning curve, and it didn't have to be if I'd listened to my care team. Lesson 2, right? The bowel issues, on the other hand, were not just limited to diarrhea. I'm about to get a bit personal here, but it's important you know that other things can happen and do happen. Constipation, my old friend, was also a challenge. It was all or nothing on some weeks. I got the usual advice about adding more fibre and keeping my fluids up, and like a good soldier, did as I was told. But Movicol was always on my shopping list, along with the Imodium for diarrhea, and a good dose of a daily electrolyte for hydration. Very important. The diarrhea was interesting, if interesting is the right word. What your team may forget to tell you, and isn't on the literature or anything that I read anyway, is that after the first doses of chemo, it may come out bright yellow. And I'm talking fluorescent yellow. No surprise, really. Chemo drugs are cytotoxic, which means they are toxic to cells, and the aim of the game is to cause oxidative stress in cancer cells and kill them off. Unfortunately, chemo kills the good cells too, as it's not smart enough to differentiate between the two. The body will go haywire trying to detox what you're pumping into your system. But the bright yellow caught me off guard, and I thought my insides must be melting until I called my care nurse Jess, and she explained it wasn't anything to be concerned about as long as it wasn't consistently happening, which thankfully it wasn't. Okay, now I get very personal. The one that did really take me by surprise and is a little uncomfortable to share, but there's no point in this podcast if I'm not open about everything, is the bouts of fecal incontinence. By that I mean pooing without realising it's happening. This can occur due to nerve damage caused by the chemo, and you can lose that sense of when you need to go to the toilet. The first time it happened to me, I was shocked to the core. I was embarrassed and devastated all at the same time. I thought this was the start of adult incontinence for the rest of my life, but I'm happy to report it's not a daily occurrence. And yes, it still happens at times, even after the hard stuff is finished. But I learned to adapt and be conscious of it during treatment. It's definitely rare these days, and I take precautions by wearing pads and tracking my bowel movements in my journal. But it can be extremely challenging. Just know it's a normal part of the process. If it happens to you, talk to your team and get the right support. If you aren't having chemo and this is happening to you and you don't know why, get yourself to a doctor ASAP. Lesson 4. What's on the menu? From round 1 to the current day, my taste for food and my diet has changed. I won't talk too much about my diet as the next episode goes into more detail about the radical lifestyle changes I made in order to give myself the best chance of living a longer life with this disease. What I can say is that eating food was no longer the gastronomic delight I'd enjoyed all these years. It sucked. And I mean the worst kind of, it sucked. In the first few rounds of treatment, a piece of toast, which I loved with a bit of Vegemite on top for breakfast, went from tasting like it should to resembling cardboard. For those that don't know, Vegemite is an Australian spread and made with leftover bruschettas plus some other bits. Not for everyone, I know, but it didn't matter what I put on the toast. Vegemite, peanut butter, marmalade, it was all tasteless. It wasn't just toast either. It was everything that was sour, sweet, or spicy. Nothing tasted as it should. Any hot spices felt exactly that, just hot. And it put me off food and it became an effort to eat. In the early stages, Dr. P, my oncologist, had told me not to worry too much about it, as long as I ate to keep my strength up and to keep the weight on. She suggested high-calorie foods were the way to go, even if I couldn't taste it. Eat what I like was basically the message. I will say in this episode right here, right now, this is the one thing she and I didn't agree on, and I will never agree on. But she was just following what most oncologists are taught, and nutrition is not high on that list. So I understood the need to keep the weight up, as this chemo was a taste bud and appetite killer, but I wasn't about to start eating burger and chips, sugary foods and fatty foods every day. Plus the thought of junk food made my stomach turn a lot. The smell of certain foods was already challenging my gag reflex, so be aware that foods you previously loved may drop off the dinner menu altogether. Garlic and the smell of red meat cooking were the worst offenders for me. It was so bad that I had to leave the kitchen when hubby was on dinner duty. So expect your taste buds and tolerance for certain foods to change. It will, I can almost guarantee it. And if you are one of the lucky ones this doesn't happen to, then I'm happy to admit I am green with envy. It certainly wasn't the case for me, but I'm glad to report my taste has restored to some degree since ending IV treatment. At the time, I dealt with it by supplementing my food with good quality protein shakes, vegetable stews and soups. Simple but effective. The other thing I should mention here is in relation to the oxyplatin treatment. I touched on this a bit in part 1, but if you are about to embark on this as part of your treatment plan, then this is an important reminder. Don't touch, eat, or drink anything cold for at least 48 hours after treatment. I found it went a bit longer for me. 72 hours was a safer margin. I learned the lesson the hard way thinking I'd be fine. But eating anything cold from the fridge or drinking cold water was like having your insides frozen. Touching anything cold was what I can only imagine frostbite feels like. It hurt, and it numbed the tips of my fingers. I took to wearing gloves a lot, following my one day in hospital every fortnight. My at-home treatment wasn't an issue as it didn't contain oxyplatin. I'd also recommend heat pads for your hands to keep them warm if available to you. I used to pop them inside my gloves and it worked a treat.
Lesson 5. Why am I so damn tired?
Let's talk about fatigue. Holy Batman. Get ready for what may be an extreme drop in energy. This didn't really kick in for me until after round 2. If you recall, round 2 was delayed due to the blood clot in my lung and a low white blood cell count. So my body had a bit of a chance to bounce back during the additional week rest period between treatments. But from round 2, all bets were off. The level of tiredness was nothing I'd experienced before. And if you think it won't happen to you on any level during chemo, you are wrong. It doesn't matter how good my diet, exercise, or anything else I was doing to support myself during treatment. The fatigue put me on my arse. If you're going through this and have your own story to tell that doesn't include restless nights and barely functioning bouts of tiredness, I can only say congratulations and I wish. The only time I could imagine this not happening to me was if the chemo dosage was low or I'd finished treatment. But at the height of my IV treatment, this was a constant. Every single day, no ifs or buts. Some days it was hard to drag myself out of bed, and that did happen on several occasions where nausea, diarrhea, lack of food all contributed. My advice, if this happens to you, just go with it. Rest if you need to. It's not a competition. This is where being kind to yourself is the most important thing of all. Sleep is imperative to getting on top of things. It's not a magic bullet, but it definitely helps. I also allowed myself to relax my exercise, but I would always do at least 10 to 15 minutes of walking on days where I was up and about. Most times it was outdoors in the sunshine walking Harry, my dog, but sometimes on the home treadmill I'm lucky to have if I was particularly tired or the weather was bad. I didn't work. I couldn't work even at home. I'm always amazed at those going through chemo who still get themselves to the office every day. Kudos to you. But I suspect it comes down to personal circumstances and chemo dosage, and I can't speak for everyone. So I learned not to compare myself to others in this regard. I didn't beat myself up about it. Was it frustrating for an ex-workaholic? Yes, absolutely. But I used the time to rest and recover to support my body for the upcoming rounds, and it taught me a valuable lesson about not being governed by expectations, mine or anyone else's. A very smart move on my part.
Lesson 6. Hair today, gone tomorrow.
From as early as round 2, I've been told that I may start to experience hair loss. It wasn't a certainty and could well be restricted to certain parts of the body. I did consider a cooling cap, which works by reducing the amount of chemo that impacts the hair follicles on your head. However, after a bit of research, it became clear to me that this was more beneficial and had a better success rate for those receiving chemo for hormone-related cancers such as breast cancer. As pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, which is what I have, is predominantly digestive related, I wasn't convinced this would make much difference. But it was a personal choice to not do it, so I can't say if it would have been worth it. Anyway, there was limited availability where I was being treated, so I took the view it should be booked by someone more in need than me. I'm sure there were other avenues to do this, but I didn't bother looking into it. I was going to embrace whatever happened. For someone who had long blonde hair for most of her life, this was a bit of a mindfuck. My hair was my signature look. It was my trademark feature for many years. Not that I'm vain. Well, maybe just a little. All the while I still had hair, though, I was convinced it wouldn't affect me, until the inevitable happened around my third dose of chemo. I remember it clearly. I was in the shower and washing my hair when a big handful just came away in my hand. I stared at it for a while and then the reality hit. Strangely, I didn't cry. I burst out laughing. Me, bald. I had no idea how I would carry this off. So I pivoted from do I need a wig to I need a wig to no, I don't need a wig to embrace the baldness dawn. Eventually, vanity did get the better of me, and I went with my girlfriends Claire and Meredith to a wig store to be fitted for a wig close to my original hair length and colour. The irony now is I wore it once. Despite being measured and fitted properly, it really hurt my head. I wasn't used to wearing wigs and it felt very uncomfortable even though it looked quite natural. So it stayed on its stand in the bathroom and is still there, although my intention is to donate it to the hospital on my next visit. Obviously, this experience may be different as well as difficult for others, so I don't underestimate the impact of losing one's hair. For me, though, I took the view that it's just hair and it will grow back. It wasn't long after I started losing my hair that it started looking a bit raggedy, and I had it all shaved off. I loved the experience of picking out different headscarves and turbans to colour match my outfits, and I wore them with confidence. I also had a few purple ones to represent the colour of this cancer and to raise awareness. The weirdest thing was the reaction of other people. I felt like Moses on occasion. People would part ways on the pavement when I came towards them. It was very sweet, but a part of me also thought maybe they think whatever I have is contagious. I guess turbans do tend to shout, "Cancer patient coming through." So I shouldn't have been surprised. But for the most part, people have been incredibly kind. I lost all the hair on my body eventually, with the exception of my eyelashes, which was very odd. So there's no hard and fast rule as to where it will go first, how much will be lost, or for how long. Just know that it does and will grow back eventually for most of us, even during high doses of treatment. It happened to me around the 5-month mark, and if you haven't already been told or been through it, changing colour and chemo curls is a thing, as you can see.
Lesson 7. Chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy.
Another condition that wasn't really discussed with me at the outset is CIPN, chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy. I've been told about hand-foot syndrome, HFS, also known technically as palmar-plantar erythrodysesthesia, PPE for short. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. But it is a common side effect of some chemotherapy treatments, particularly 5-FU and capecitabine, both of which were and are part of my ongoing treatment plan. HFS, I was told, would show up as tingling or numbness in the hands and feet and present with redness, swelling and peeling of the skin. So I was to use chemical-free moisturiser for my hands and feet daily as a preventative measure during my treatment. But HFS is different to CIPN. HFS affects the skin, while CIPN affects the nerves and is not just limited to hands and feet. Hence the fecal incontinence issue I mentioned earlier. CIPN kicked in for me during round 6 or 7 of IV treatment. It started as a feeling of numbness in the tips of my fingers and toes and felt worse in the colder weather. It later progressed to my entire fingers and the base of my feet up to my ankles. It's not something I was initially prepared for, and it can inhibit the ability to button up shirts, tie shoelaces, and feel if something is hot or cold. I took to wearing something on my feet at all times, as there was no way I would know if I stood on something that could cut me and potentially cause a life-threatening infection. It can also affect balance, but that has been less of an issue for me. I still have CIPN today. I'm told that it can recover after chemo finishes, and it takes approximately twice the length of the chemo treatment to fully restore feeling. But there are no guarantees. I've learned to live with it and have recently started acupuncture to help with the symptoms, which has greatly improved things. I wish I'd started it sooner, really. I'll be honest and say that CIPN is the one thing that does get me down on occasion. I tell myself it's okay to feel pissed off with it sometimes, although I don't stay in that space mentally for long. I'm still here. So if this is the worst I have to feel physically right now, I'm more than good with that.
Lesson 8. When the plan is not the plan.
Overall, my initial treatment plan for IV chemotherapy went well. But as with all best laid plans, sometimes the unexpected happens and adjustments need to be made. This was the case for me on a few occasions. The cause was due in large part to my blood count. And chemo is tough. It's treatment, but it's toxic, so it can be hard to keep the body's defense systems firing on all cylinders. My neutrophils, aka white blood cells, would either dip too low or my red blood cell count would be insufficient. Both very important for optimal recovery during treatment. When this happened, treatment would be postponed and pushed out a week or two depending on the reading. There are other measures that can affect treatment too, such as liver and kidney function, which is why the blood test prior to each treatment was so important. Any delay was frustrating but necessary. On a positive note, it gave my body a greater chance to bounce back and manage the treatment. On one occasion, I got sick with gastro, which laid me up in bed for a week. Another instance where I should have gone to hospital, but I insisted on staying at home, as I was concerned I'd be more at risk in a hospital ward while being so immune compromised. I'd spoken to my care nurse at the time, Jess, and agreed that if I deteriorated, I would go straight to emergency. Dr. P, on finding out, on the other hand, wasn't impressed. But it was my choice. But my next treatment was pushed out 2 weeks as a result. All in all, I got through the treatment plan fairly unscathed, apart from the typical side effects plus a few other unexpected symptoms mentioned. But with that said, there was a lot I also did to contribute to the success of my initial treatment. This included taking more accountability for my health and well-being and the decisions around the plan and what was best for me. Remember, your oncologist works for you, not the other way around. It's easy to bow to their knowledge and experience and hand over all the decisions about your future to the medical experts. They absolutely have your best interests at heart. But for me, it was important to maintain a sense of ownership of the plan. My life was changing in ways I had no control over, and accepting this was paramount. But controlling the narrative and being part of the decision-making process was, and still is, equally important.
Lesson 9. Riding the emotional roller coaster.
The emotional roller coaster while going through treatment with no real end in sight is tricky to navigate. In the beginning, there were days when I wanted to scream and shout about the unfairness of it all. Not being able to do all the things I did before or plan time away while in the thick of treatment was challenging. I was desperate to see my family and bestie overseas and get a real hug in the fear I may never see them again. But I made a choice very quickly. I could either dig my heels in and fight, or I could accept and give in to the prognosis. The latter was not and never will be an option. That's not to say there haven't been down days. Chemo takes so much emotionally as well as physically. When it gets rough, it would be so easy to throw in the towel and say enough. I wouldn't be human if I said I'm going through this whole journey with a perpetual smile on my face. You wouldn't buy it, and I certainly wouldn't sell it as all being a bed of roses. But I don't dwell in the house of negativity. Of course, I give myself permission to feel angry, frustrated, pissed off, or whatever negative emotion takes over, but only for a short time. Then I remind myself how lucky I am to still be here and the amazing support I have from everyone around me. I think I once shocked a friend of mine when I said I see this cancer as a gift. Sounds crazy, right? But the reality is I would never have stopped to consider how I was treating myself or others. I wouldn't have seen the opportunity let alone taking it to stop and really appreciate my life, family, and friends for whatever time I have left on this planet. It's a shame it takes a chronic illness to make us appreciate wellness. So every day that I wake up still breathing is a great day. And I'm grateful every single day that I have options available to me to help fight this disease. My mindset is my greatest ally in all of this. But it takes practice to see the good in so many things when the crap hits the fan and treatment makes you feel sick and exhausted. Unfortunately, you will also encounter people with stories how they know someone who had this disease and survived only insert number of weeks here. To those out there who do this, please stop. I'm not sure why you think someone going through this would want to hear it. Perhaps it makes you feel like you know what we're going through, but you can never truly understand, no matter how good your intentions. The best thing you can do is offer encouragement or simply say, "What do you need?" That's more than enough for me. Some other things I do to help me stay on top of my emotions is meditation and also journaling. It's not for everyone, but it's worth a try. Art is also great therapy. A friend of mine gave me an adult colouring book, so I have a bit of fun with that. There's a lot of F words in there which can suit my mood on any given day. I also have a puzzle that is a great distraction. The key for me was to find the beauty in the simple things. The roller coaster then became less about the ups and downs in the here and now, and more about the happy and fun experiences to come. And gratitude is a great leveler.
Lesson 10, and finally the good stuff, my results.
My results are testament to the work I put in to help my body, mind, and spirit to heal. My approach to treatment has been a combination of a traditional and holistic approach to wellness. I get quite passionate about this topic, which you will hear in the next episode. I started this journey with a positive mindset and a will to beat this thing for as long as possible, and that has not changed. My IV chemo treatment, which started in the May and ended in December 2024, was not an easy journey. But the alternative would have been much worse, and I would not change anything about my approach. I did the full 12 rounds, which my cancer care team said was rare for this condition. I was told many patients get to 8 or 9 rounds and make the call to stop. There could be many reasons for that, but I can only assume the toll that chemo takes mentally and physically is a key part of that decision. I also attribute my ability to get through all 12 to my fitness going into this and my lifestyle changes since. But I totally get why some would not want to continue. It's not for the faint-hearted, and if you look at the stats, not on Dr. Google, please, chemo success rates for pancreatic cancer vary greatly depending on the stage and other factors. But there is no guarantees in life with or without cancer, so I had to give it my best shot, right? And seriously, we don't know how strong we are until we have no choice. And I am super proud I got through it. At the outset, I registered a 306 blood tumour marker and tumours in numerous parts of my body. As of today, I'm happy to report that only the tumour on my pancreas tail is visible on the scans and is less than half its original size. My blood tumour marker now sits at 17 and has been that way since December, so everything is stable. And although I am beyond happy with this result, my aim is to get to remission. It's a long game and I know things don't happen overnight, but I am confident I have all the resources I need to see this through. Since December, I've been in maintenance mode and taken a low dose of capecitabine. These are chemo tablets. The tablets have definitely been a game changer for me, as it's given me a lot more flexibility to do the things I love, and I'm dealing less and less with physical symptoms associated with IV treatment. All super positive and very promising results.
So where am I up to now?
In January 2025, I officially became an outpatient. And although chemo tablets for maintenance is now a normal part of my life going forward, if it helps me stick around for a lot longer, then I'm totally on board with it. I truly wish that one day we find a cure, although I'm not sure it will happen in my lifetime. Until that happens, all I can offer in the way of advice is the choice is yours. You can reduce your risk of chronic disease altogether by making the right decisions about your health. Do right by your body and give yourself the best chance of a long and healthy future without cancer or the need for chemo. That's my biggest and heartfelt wish for everyone, as cancer is becoming more commonplace in young and old alike. In part 3, I will talk about the game changer that is mindset and my strong belief in the body's innate ability to heal itself given the right environment. I believe it has played a significant role in why I'm still here. Thanks once again for tuning in and taking the time to listen. Comments, feedback, or questions are all welcome. You can also private message me on email at thebigpurplec@gmail.com. If you are getting value from this podcast, be sure to follow along, share it, and give it a rating. Until next time, love and light to you all, and bye for now.